If you're in the market for a car and you're looking to avoid paying interest, then 0% APR offers have likely caught your attention. And as a savvy Muslim consumer, you should always ask the questions, number one, is this halal? And number two, is this a good deal for me financially? And if you're in this position, then you're in luck, because in this video, I'm going to answer these two questions for you, so stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum, my name is Rakan Kayali and welcome to Practical Islamic Finance, where we try to understand financial matters and build wealth in a way that is in line with Islamic principles. If you live in the United States and you need halal funding, go to fundmebff.com. We offer interest-free halal funding that can be used for basically anything. Additionally, if you earn more than $200,000 annually and you would like to become an investor, go to fundmebff.com and apply to become an investor. All right, let's get started. So the first question I want to answer is whether or not 0% APR offers that we see many car dealerships often offer are actually a good deal or not. The answer to this question is basically it depends. And most likely, it isn't a good deal at all. To explain this answer, let's first start with what APR means. It means annual percentage rate. And in the context of selling cars, it refers to the interest rate that the dealership is charging you for any financing that they provide you. In the case of 0% APR, they are claiming that they are not charging any interest when they sell you a car, even if they finance you part of the price of that car. So 0% interest is obviously better than any percentage of interest that's above zero. The less you have to pay, the better. And this is all fine and dandy so long as the principal amount that you have to pay is the same as well. So let's say that you are purchasing a $20,000 car and the period of your financing is 5 years. If you're offered 5% interest on your financing on the $20,000 that you're financed with, then you're going to end up paying $22,645 over those 5 years. If you're offered 0%, then you're going to end up paying $20,000, the same amount, because you're not accruing any interest. Where it becomes tricky is when the dealership increases the price of the car that you pay for in installments when compared to the price that you would have paid if you paid for the car in cash, and then says, oh, well, we're offering you 0% APR. Now let's consider the following two scenarios. Scenario one is that you purchased the $20,000 car for $20,000 at an APR of 5% for 5 years, in which case, if you take the full 5 years to pay off your debt, you're going to end up paying $22,645. And then scenario two is that the $20,000 car, the same car, is sold to you for $22,645. So that's the purchase price, at an APR of 0% for 5 years. So the expected amount, if you take 5 years, or if you take any amount of time less than 5 years, you're going to end up having to pay $22,645. Which of these two scenarios is more advantageous? Well, I'm here to tell you that scenario one is more advantageous to the buyer than scenario two. Scenario two is more advantageous to the seller than scenario one, even though scenario one offers 5% APR and scenario two is 0% APR. And the reason why scenario one is more advantageous is that in the case of scenario one, if the buyer pays off their debt early, they're going to end up paying less than $22,645. If the buyer pays off their debt entirely in 2 years, they're going to end up paying close to 21,000. They're going to end up paying close to 21,000. However, if in scenario 2, the buyer pays off their debt early, and let's say it only takes them 2 years, they're still on the hook for $22,645. That's what they're going to pay regardless. Now you may be saying, well, what if it takes the person more than 5 years to pay off their debt? Isn't scenario 2 more advantageous since their debt is not going to be growing since it's 0% APR? Well, if it takes you more than 5 years, that means you are late on at least one of your payments, and therefore you're going to be assessed a penalty. And if you continue to be late, you're going to wake up one day with the car missing from your driveway because it will have been towed. So there are no advantages to the customer in scenario 2 versus scenario 1. Zero. So it's important before you go clamoring to the dealership asking to get their 0% APR offer to understand whether or not they've jacked up the price of the car on you. 0% APR doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good deal. It may be much more advantageous to the dealership to jack up the price of the car and claim that they're offering 0% APR than it is for them to sell the car for its cash price and offer a APR that's above 0%. Because, as we mentioned, scenario 1 may be more advantageous to the buyer because it gives them the option to pay off their debt early and end up paying less to the dealership. So I hope this idea is clear. The second question we want to answer regarding 0% APR financing deals is whether or not they are halal. Now, obviously, if the dealership is offering the 0% APR without increasing the price of the cars that it's selling, then there's nothing wrong with this. It's completely halal. The issue arises when dealerships claim that they're offering 0% APR, but they increase the price that you pay when you pay for the car in installments versus when you pay for the car in cash. And now the question we have to answer is this halal? That is it okay to pay an increased price in installments when the product is sold for less when you pay for it in cash? To answer this question, we need to understand two things. The first is the definition of riba, and the second is the anatomy of an installment sale. Let's start with the definition of riba. Before Islam, it was commonplace amongst Arabs who were owed money to go to the borrower on the due date and basically give them a choice between two things. Either pay the amount that they owed or push their due date into the future and require them to pay more to them at that future date. So increasing their indebtedness in return for giving them more time to pay off their loan. This is called riba al-jahiliyyah. This is what was done during the time before Islam. And then Islam came to prohibit this practice and prohibit basically any loan of money where the lender was contractually guaranteed to profit or benefit from their loan. So now that we understand what riba is, let's look at what an installment sale is. Basically, an installment sale is you pay for part of the thing that you're buying. In the case of a car, you're paying part of its price, and then the rest of its price you pay in installments. Typically, it's every month for a number of months until you finish the price of the car that you purchased. From a seller's perspective, the difference between selling for cash and selling for installments is that in the case of installments, the seller is agreeing to wait to receive their money. Now, in order to ascertain whether or not they're collecting riba, you have to answer the question, is the seller charging a fee to the buyer in return for them agreeing to wait to receive the price of the car? And in the case the installment price is higher than the cash price of the car, the seller is absolutely charging the buyer a fee. And that fee is basically the difference between the installment price of the car and the cash price of the car. Now, one may argue that this isn't really riba because it's not interest. With interest, the amount of indebtedness increases with time. At least typically this is how it works. But when you purchase something with installments, your indebtedness is not increasing with time. It's fixed at the outset of the agreement. So whether you pay off your indebtedness in 1 year or you pay it off in 5 years, you're still going to pay off the same amount. So it's not exactly interest. And to this I would say, assume for argument's sake, it's not interest. I don't really care what you call it. You could call it a potato salad for all I care. What matters is, does it meet the definition of riba or not? Not whether or not it meets the definition of interest. Interest is an example of riba. Recall here what we said about the definition of riba, and that it is any loan of money in which there is a contractual guarantee of benefit to the lender. Charging a fee in return for waiting to receive money that is owed to you exactly meets the definition of riba. So in light of this, maybe it's interest, maybe it isn't, but it sure as heck is riba. Another argument that one may make is that there's no actual loan of money because no cash exchanges hand. It's not like the seller gives the buyer an amount of money and then the buyer uses the money to purchase the car. So there is no loan of money. To that, I would say there doesn't have to be an exchange of cash in order for there to be a loan of money. When you use your credit card to buy an item, the credit card company doesn't deposit money into your account. You receive no cash from the credit card company. And yet, no two would disagree that the interest that the credit card company charges on any outstanding balance is a form of riba. So even though a separate explicit loan is not being made, for all intents and purposes, in practicality, there's no difference between borrowing money from a third party and going to the car dealership, purchasing the car for the lower cash price, and then agreeing to pay that third party a fee that is equal to the difference between the cash price and the installment price that the dealership was offering. There's no difference between this arrangement and the arrangement where the buyer goes into the car dealership and simply buys from the seller and agrees to pay the seller the higher installment price. In practicality, there is no difference. And what matters in Islam is what happens in practicality. And that's why I called this channel Practical Islamic Finance. Other arguments that have been made in defense of increasing the price of an item when it is paid for in installments include a reference to the authenticated record, which shows that the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Sayyidina Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, both purchased items on different occasions or paid for items in different occasions in installments. And they extrapolate from this that this necessarily means that the price that they paid in installments was higher than the price that they would have paid for those items in cash. And to that I would say, for this to be true, it would mean that in no instances whatsoever has any seller ever sold a buyer anything in installments for the same price that they would have sold that same item in cash. And this is demonstrably false. It doesn't follow from the fact that the Prophet, peace be upon him, and Sayyidina Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, purchased things in installments. It doesn't follow from this that they must have purchased those things for a higher price than the cash price of those items. There are a slew of other reasons that one can think of that would motivate a seller to sell in installments for the same price that they would sell in cash. One of them being that perhaps the sale doesn't happen altogether if they don't agree to sell in installments. Yet another argument that is made for the halalness of increasing the price of an item when it is paid for in installments versus its cash price is that the opposite is certainly halal. And what is meant by the opposite is something called bay'u salam, where someone pays for something in advance for a price that is lower than its current price. The response to this is that the most you can receive with bay'u salam is not a guaranteed profit, but a perceived profit or a perceived advantage. And what do I mean by this? Let's say you purchased a ton of dates for $1,000 today. And today the price of a ton of dates is $2,000. and you purchase this ton of dates so that they are delivered to you a year from now. When those dates are delivered to you a year from now, the price of dates may have dropped to $1,000, may have dropped to $500, you don't know. So the most you can get with Bay' as-Salam is a perceived benefit, a expected benefit, but not a guaranteed benefit. Further still, in the case of Bay' as-Salam, there is no loan of money. When I purchase something in advance of receiving it, the person I bought the item from doesn't owe me an amount of money. When delivery time comes, they have to deliver a product to me, not an amount of money. So the argument that the opposite is halal and therefore selling in installments for a higher price is definitely halal has no merits whatsoever. It's important for me to call things as I see them, and the way I see jacking up the price of an item in return for selling it in installments, the way I see this is simply a hile. It's a trick to circumvent the prohibition of riba. It makes no sense for the customer to do this, and it is simply a fee that the seller is charging in return for waiting for the price of the item they sold you to return to them. Now, you may be saying that, okay, logically you've convinced me I can, but is there any hadith that may support your claim? And there absolutely is. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Man ba'a bay'atayn fi bay'a falahu awkasuhuma aw al-riba," which means whosoever sells or makes two sales in one, they are entitled to the lower of the two prices, or they've committed riba. Now, not everyone that commented on this hadith had the same interpretation, but there are a lot of well-known scholars that agree with my opinion in that selling in installments for a higher price is absolutely riba, and this is what this hadith refers to. And I think that logically it's impossible for selling at a higher price in installments to be halal, whereas riba is haram. It's impossible to say both of these statements are true. We know that riba is haram, and therefore it must be true that selling in installments for a higher price is haram. Now you may be asking, well, how do I know what the cash price is versus if they have increased the price of the car on me? The best way to ensure that you're not falling into riba when you purchase a car or purchase anything else is to get your funding from a third party. So walk into the car dealership with your financing or with your cash in hand and then purchase your car. That way you'll not only make sure that you're not falling into riba, you'll get a much better deal doing things this way as well. Remember, car dealerships make most of their money from the financing that they offer, not from the sale of the car itself. The price of the car is basically determined by the MSRP, the manufacturer's suggested retail price. The wiggle room that dealerships have is in the financing that they offer and the add-ons that they tack on to your purchase. So make sure that you walk into a dealership with your financing from a third party, not from the dealership. That's my advice to you. So that's my opinion on 0% APR offers and whether selling in installments for a higher price versus cash price is riba or not. I hope you found this video beneficial. Leave a like for the algorithm, subscribe for more content, and remember, the only Islamic finance is practical Islamic finance, trademark by the way. Until next time, take care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you all.